Okay. Okay, do I go on to the next one? And then the next thing they did after this report came out is they put the survey online to find out what people's values mattered most. Did any of you complete that survey? You did? Did you find it useful?
It was actually ridiculous. I don't understand. It was designed by a 12-year-old guy.
It was.
And leading questions, but there were half a dozen questions that I could not answer. Because none of the choices, there was none of the above. And it was crazy.
That's right,
But
yeah.
maybe too many exceptions.
Yeah. And a lot of them are slanted to make PR look better. Like, would you like PR result in extremist parties or something like that?
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Which do you prefer? A good stable government with first past the post, or a totally unstable disruptive government with PR?
It was fun.
it was slanted. And then when the report came out in the media and that, I mean, basically what the summary was, well, Canadians can't agree on anything. But if we actually went through the detailed answers, the one thing that Canadians did agree, and it was asked in about 5 different ways, is that they wanted parties to collaborate and work together. If there was one thing that came out of that crappy survey, that they want parties to work together, which is basic proportional representation. That's what happens under proportional representation. So.
Almost there.
Almost there, okay.
Push it, that's all enough. Sorry about that, Pat.
Okay, no problem. So, I mean, we had the Liberals make this promise in the 2015 election, and Trudeau's repeated over 1,800 times since. And then last month, we'd kind of seen this coming all along. They didn't seem to be all that committed to it. But he up and said, no, we're not doing electoral reform. So, of course, people that have been advocating for electoral reform are quite upset. We've been working our butts off since, doing presentations and making submissions and whatnot, and, kind of led down the garden path. But what that has happened as a result of that is we've now got a lot of press, where the press wouldn't report on the electoral reform committee meetings. They are reporting on Trudeau's abandonment of his electoral reform promise. So we are getting a lot of press, and we're getting a lot more interest in it. So it has been one way of expanding the conversation to a broader segment of the population. And it's true that, and we run into this all the time. There's a lot of citizens who, are not aware of electoral reform, have no great interest in it. But the surveys that come out show that people are very unhappy with their governments. They may not have connected with how the electoral system can help fix it, but they know something is wrong. And so when we talk to people about it, we usually don't have much difficulty convincing them that PR is the way to go. But it's that awareness that's the issue. Okay, the other thing that's been floated around, the excuses that have been coming out. I mean, bad insult to injury. First of all, there was no consensus. Now, the PR is going to create all these extremist parties. We have extremists now. They're in the big tent parties. Under a PR system, you probably will see some splintering of the parties. You'll see a few more parties. You'll see, whatever the definition of extremist is. I mean, extremist is in the mind of the beholder. Everyone deserves representation. And if they get enough votes, they should have representation. And having, people on the fringe have seats. I mean, they're there now. They're in coalition behind the scenes with the big tech parties. But actually giving them seats is not going to make a great deal of difference. It may make them more visible, but certainly doesn't give them any more power. And in fact, we're in greater danger of extremism under our current system. I mean, they can get 100% of the power with, very few votes. And in fact, I mean, the first past the post hasn't stopped Trump from getting in. And, if Kelly Leach gets in, that's the name that Trudeau keeps throwing her. I mean, she's already got her party. All she's got to do is, get her party in power. So with proportional representation, yeah, what people may consider extremists, maybe get a few seats, might be a little bit more visible, but they're out in the public. And this is one of the things that the committee members kept asking. There were witnesses from Scotland and Germany and Ireland and New Zealand. What about all these extremist parties that are controlling the government? And they're saying, what are you talking about? That's not an issue. I mean, why would a party with 2 seats have that great of influence on a government when there's parties that are more alike that can certainly form a majority? So it really doesn't make a great deal of sense. It would be very rare that a very small party would, wag the tail of the dog sort of thing. Okay. I think we're getting towards the end here. Oh, so next steps. Immediately after that announcement, we had protests across the country. I think it was 18, 19 cities or whatnot. Toronto, the media reported 300 turned out. It was closer to 3,000. That's another problem we have with media reporting, but there was a great turnout. So certainly there is some
Alternative facts.
alternative facts, yes. Alternative
Who has
facts.
the facts and what the alternative facts are?
This is, we're just a citizens group. How do we bring a message to the public? I mean, we send letters and stuff into the media. Once in a while we get something published. But the way that it's one of the ways we bring our message to people. The other thing that is going on right now is that there's a petition to pursue electoral reform that was actually put up in November, but it's taken off in the last week or two. There's now, I think there was 123,000 signatures on it as of this week. That petition is open to March the 2nd. It's an e-petition. Now you can go online to do petitions to Parliament. You don't have to submit paper petitions anymore. So please, if you support PR, that petition is live until March the 2nd.
Is it linked on your website? On this?
Probably linked, but probably the easiest way to go is type in Google Parliament of Canada petitions, and it's petition number E616.
If you don't mind, what I might do is post this link under your video on YouTube.
Oh, sure, yeah. There is probably a link on our Care About Canada website too, but it's probably just easier to do Parliament of Canada petitions. It's the only one on electoral reform. Look for the one that has 123,000 votes. It's the most votes that any Canadian petition has ever had.
Really?
Yes, and most of them have been put up there in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So please do that. Talk to your MP. Write letters. I mean, you talk to the MPs all the time. Nobody's interested in it. Nobody's calling me about this. Nobody's sending. Please flood the MP's office. Send letters off to Prime Minister. If you go on the Fair Vote website, I should have put the link up there. We have a standard email. You can go in and you can put your MP and send it off. I think there's actually even a dialer for the Prime Minister's office. At one point, the Prime Minister's office just basically the phone system shut down because there were so many phone calls coming in. You may not get a hold of somebody, leave a message. Let them know. The Goggin is the MP in this riding. I can tell you he's supportive of PR, but most of the Liberal MPs are keeping that under their hats these days. But he's a great guy to talk about. He knows quite a bit about it. I've been out to talk to him a few times, and he actually asked me to present at his town hall like, none of the other local entities would let Fairfield Canada present at their town halls. Goggin and Eker College had a joint town hall, and they allowed me to present, so that was a real plus. They both said at their town hall, and that's the only time I've ever heard them say that, they both supported PI. But anyway, let them know there's interest. And I think, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Do you have some questions or discussion?
There's more to, so I'm just going to.
Oh, okay, that was just supplementary stuff I think I've covered. Yeah, I won't go through the rest of it. Okay, referendums, of course, we really have no position on a referendum, but we don't think it's the greatest way
If you
to.
don't mind, I might post also this,
Sure, you can post that
this,
stuff, yeah.
maybe I'll meet up under this meeting or something.
Yeah, yeah. Referendum hasn't been the greatest way to get electoral reform in this country, so, and there's a lot of good reasons not to happen. But we don't really have a strong position, one way or another, on it. Yes,
So, here's my take on what happened. I actually am not quite as cynical as you, which is, for me, the first. I think Trudeau actually wanted electoral reform. I think he thought that he could get all-party consensus on some view and move forward with Canadians basically on board. But he was screwed by the Conservatives who demanded a referendum. And he's smart enough to know that that's never going to work, and therefore drop it and move on to the business. I agree with you that you probably went about it the wrong way. If you want something, you have to advocate it, you have to push for it, you have to stand up and be accountable. You did not do that, and that's why I'm going to be meeting with your friend. Maybe I can ask you to come along. But I actually think that's a better explanation of what actually happened there. He was smart enough to realize that a referendum is just not in the cards. It's just not going to work.
and I don't disagree with that. And in fact, that's kind of consistent. First of all, the chair of the Electoral Reform Committee, Scar Pelagia, that was one of the comments he made at their press conference after the report was issued. Well, we thought it was going to be ranked ballot, and that would have been so easy to implement. And, you know, we didn't think it was going to be a problem with ranked ballot, and that's, you know, so here we're sitting. And in fact, Trudeau himself has always been a supporter of ranked ballot. Now, the Liberal, I was at the Liberal Policy Conventions, and at the last one in 2014 was when we actually added proportional representation. Before that, the Liberal policy was alternative vote, and we added proportional representation in 2014. Trudeau, for about a year after, was still sending out letters when people inquired supporting alternative vote. And he confirmed it, and he got quiet about it. He said, oh, it's not up to me. Got quiet about it, but he confirmed that again a couple of weeks ago that he supported alternative vote. What upsets us is that there's no support in the evidence for alternative vote, and they should have known that. I mean, we've had all these studies, you know, and the Electoral Reform Committee, there might have been 4% of the people who supported alternative vote. So that's where the cynicism comes in, is, you know, why did you think you were going to get away with that if you're an evidence-based party? You knew what the evidence was, yeah.
My views on this are evolving, and frankly, I'm going to kind of give you an alternative way of seeing this, but I'm not sure that I'm totally convinced of either way. So I might sound negative, maybe I'm negative, but not as negative as I'm sounding. I would argue that the focus on the problems of first past the post implied that the solution was to avoid the strategic voting problems, and that the solution by definition was instant runoff, or what you call alternative vote. So it seemed as if, it's as if there might have been at a certain point a consensus on instant runoff or on alternative vote, and it's as if there was this bait and switch. I know it sounds negative, but I think that the perception has been that after the focus being on the first past the post, the solution would have been, okay, solve the problem with alternative past the post. And now, now that there might have been a consensus for replacing the first past the post, we're talking about all those very kind of more complex, I'm not saying wrong, but complex versions. And I think that put a damper on efforts for reform, because maybe people who were willing to support the alternative vote kind of backed away, saying, hey, this is much bigger than we thought, maybe we're kind of buying into something that we are not getting to buy, let's think again.
And I don't disagree with that. You know, people that, you know, haven't looked at the issue closely, alternative vote sounds like, you know, yeah, people think, yes, strategic voting and vote splitting is a problem, and alternative vote will solve that problem. And on the surface of it, you know, I can see people thinking that, but it doesn't, that's the problem. Yeah.
Okay, let me give you another proposition. I don't know if other people agree with this. I think that efforts at reforming governance through proportional representation put too much weight on the electoral part, the voting part of the system, rather than on the entire governance. For example, arguably, I would say that having a single House of Parliament and a Senate that is basically, that doesn't have any power because it's appointed, is as much of a problem by itself. And the fact that you have in Parliament, all the votes are, well, I shouldn't say all, but most votes are on party lines, is the thing to reform, rather than have all different kinds of parties represented in the House. And yes, if you ask the question, where are the examples of minor parties kind of exerting a disproportionate influence? I think of Israel, for example, where you have the religious parties are saying, well, we support the government on condition of you do this, this, and this. The secular parties have their own thing, and basically you have a stronger vote on a government that can act. So, and the other thing is the countries that are most similar to Canada, that's the United States, the United Kingdom, and so on, still have majoritarian votes. So, and the countries in Europe are much more compact countries. Even if you look at Germany as a large country in Europe, it is geographically compact, and arguably its population is more similar to each other than a multicultural, pluralistic countries like North America. That's.
Well, on the issue of the instability, I mean, that's just that's
the word instability. I used in the case of Israel the fact that some minor parties have a disproportionate influence.
And Israel is one of those outliers. It really is not all that representative proportionately. So, I mean, no, they don't have problems making decisions, and they don't usually have a multitude of parties. I mean, the average number of parties, major parties in a proportional system, is about 4 or 5. And they generally, you know, 2 or 3 parties form a majority coalition, which is very stable. And it may take a little bit longer to make decisions that way, but then they're not reversing them after the next election. So there tends to be greater stability. And I've forgotten what your other point was, sorry.
No, I made also the point that countries that have the majoritarian systems, as you talk about, which includes UK, US, and Australia, since in Australia they have the alternative vote, are much more similar to Canada than the much more compact, small European countries that are internally much more similar. So geographical representation is less of an issue for them than in large kind of.
Well, that's probably why they tend more to pure proportional systems, whereas the systems that have been designed to Canada take into account the geographics of it. And in fact, First Past the Post has been responsible for cutting up Canada into parcels and making it look less, less cohesive than it is. I mean, the Stefan Dion, that was one of his arguments for proportional representation, is that we shouldn't have an electoral system, that pits one region of the country against the other and makes us look, less cohesive than we are. So, yeah, that's why we need a mating Canada system to deal with the geography as well. Good points. Well, thank you very much. Yeah,
I was just gonna say that, what would you do if you were Trudeau? How do you, what's the best strategy for convincing, the problem in Canada is that nobody's really unhappy with First Past the Post. I didn't like Mulroney, but I could tolerate him. I didn't like Stephen Harper, but he was okay. Yeah, it's not, the problem is in Canada, nobody's really upset. You keep talking about drastic changes in policy, that's really not true. There really haven't been drastic changes in policy. You'd be hard pressed to tell me that Canada under Chrétien, Martin, Harper, and Trudeau are very much different. There have been changes, but they haven't been very drastic.
I would say.
And so it's difficult to convince Canadians.
Well, but they may not also, the policies may not also be consistent with what the majority of Canadians want. And then they may not be unhappy with First Past the Post because they haven't clued in to that may be the source of the problem. But all the surveys show they are unhappy. In fact, there was the Edelman survey that came out last week that showed, Canada was a kind of, it was the trust survey. Do you trust your public institutions and government? And Canada was usually in the top 50%. Now we're in the distrustful group of countries. And they see a very real potential for what's happened in the U.S. For an alt-right party. I mean, we see Kelly Leach, she should have been blown away a long time ago, never got to where she's got. And they see the potential. And it's usually, and they broke it out between voters that are more educated and affluent and those that are less so, and it was with those that are less educated and less affluent. So, and we have, in terms of the US and the UK, US has got Trump, UK's got Brexit. Those people are not happy.
In Canada, you're going to have to wait until Kelly Leach becomes Prime Minister before Canadians really realize that they need to get higher proportional representation. What I'm saying is that if you really want proportional representation, the trick is to create crisis. And I don't think any of us are about to do that because the crisis would destroy Canada. Well, so the problem is that people are just not that unhappy.
And most of them probably don't know, do you really care?
Well, I agree with you there. I think that what brought me here to the news is the fact that what we just observed in the US and not wanting that here, it's made me look at our way we do our voting. So I'm not sure how many other people feel like I do, but I always kind of consider myself sort of like the average. So I don't know whether that weighs in as far as an influence or getting people to listen now.
I would not support Trump for a nanosecond, but I think that the reasons why he prevailed this time around, yes, the electoral system helped him obviously, but I think that it reflected deep-seated issues that would have kind of expressed themselves one way or the other, and that's what it means.
Yeah, but it's still a two-party system that doesn't give representation for the the smaller parties, and this does, so.
But I don't think that the issue of the smaller parties is the one that would have made the difference.
Don't you find we live in a divisive politics right now? It's
Yes.
like black or white. And
Yes,
that's
yes.
conservative this way, they will that way.
Yeah, no, that I agree, that I agree.
That's wrong.
In Canada?
But,
Oh, the polarization.
No,
is
I don't
terrible.
think so.
no, I agree with
I don't think so, I
that.
think we live in a divisive country.
I think even in the States, I think this is a reflection of something that has happened in the last, we can start and kind of determine different starting points, but I say that you can say going back to 1992 with Newt Gingrich, that's when things got polarized. You can start different things, but it doesn't have to be that way.
I think it goes back to Ronald Reagan quoting this, which is right.
Well, America's a
I-
special
I-
case, right,
I
because
say.
proportional
but
representation
that's not so.
really wouldn't solve many problems in the US.
Well, I think the
It's
compromise,
the two-party dictatorship that's really the problem.
to get to your point earlier, you know, where do we fix all these other problems with the Parliament? There's a lot of other reforms that need to be done. The problem is the foundation is broken, and to try and get those reforms through under the current system, and then not have them reversed with the next government. I mean, Michael Chung had a great package of reforms that he tried to get through the Reform Act. By the time he got through Parliament, it was pretty much useless. So that's, you know, no, it's not the only thing we need to do, but it's probably the foundation that's gonna help us get those other things. And in fact, that's where the support for elected reform comes from, is all these other groups, environmental groups and whatnot, that are tired of banging their heads against the wall, not getting